Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Alan, and today I've got Sue Wright with me, who is an entrepreneur, barrister and foster carer. So Sue, welcome to the channel.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on. I hope you're well.
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. It's near Christmas. We've got producer Calvin with his Christmas jumper I'm looking at right now. He's waving, but you can't see it. And it's all very, very festive, which is good. So thank you for coming on. Now, the reason I wanted to get you on was, obviously, I've seen a few LinkedIn posts over the years and you're very prominent on LinkedIn. That's probably the right words.
Yes.
I'd say, yeah, you put a lot of good posts on, speak a lot of sense, and obviously looking through your CV, it sounds like it's a job interview. This is not. Looking through your LinkedIn, you've got your career is quite varied, which was really interesting to me. And I think anyone who watches a channel about personal finance, business entrepreneurship wants to see that sort of stuff. And obviously the foster carer side of things as well is really, really interesting as well. And something I want to go into. So if you can just give me a brief overview of your career and your personal background to start with, and then we'll take it away if that's okay.
Okay. So I was born in Liverpool but moved to Southport when I was quite young, and I had an upbringing in Southport which wasn't the greatest, especially after my parents' divorce. Okay. And very early on I realised that there was the haves and the have-nots. Yep. And I think my earliest memory of that was being in school where there were children who had apples and crisps and maybe a chocolate biscuit with their packed lunch, and we never had that. We just had literally the white bread with the Shipham's paste on it. Yeah. And every day a girl called Geraldine Daly would eat her green apple, and at the end of eating her green apple she would give me the core. Okay. And I would eat the core of the apple. Yeah. And the shame of eating the apple core was outweighed by the fact that I was always hungry. Yeah. And I was even hungry on a Monday. I always remember Mondays are very, very hungry days because we went swimming. Yeah. And swimming makes you even more hungry. Cool. So I realised very early on that there were the haves and the have-nots. Yep. And then fast forward, about 14, family life imploded, exploded, whichever way you want to look at it. Yeah. And I ended up in foster care. And that foster placement ultimately broke down. I was a bit of a rebel without a cause at the time. And I was then sat in a social worker's office, which was a mobile office with very, very thin walls. Yeah. And I remember hearing her through the wall saying to her manager, well, she's actually technically homeless now. We're going to have to either put her in a B&B or we have no other alternative solution for her. Okay. So that was quite a stop heartbeat moment. Sobering, yeah. And I remember thinking, right, I'm on my own here, really. Yeah. I've got to make things different and make things better for me, or else I'm just going to drown, literally. Yeah. So I was ultimately placed into a Salvation Army operated hostel. I was only 14 at the time, and I was placed with a 17-year-old girl, and she used to self-harm all the time. Yeah. And we were given £20 a week quick save vouchers back then. Everyone remembers quick save. It's like the old style Aldi. Yeah. So they used to stack them high, all the products, no labels on them. And it was a very cheap way of buying food. Fortunately, my flatmate, Anne, who got vouchers as well, also worked in quick save. So that was my first sort of commercial understanding of buying and selling of goods and working out margins and working out percentages because Anne would get 10% discount.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah. So she would get 10% discount, but also if we merged our two lots of £20 vouchers together, that was £40 a week, which actually gave us better purchasing power.
Because you buy more.
Because we could buy items which we could then cook together and make better meals and less waste. Yeah. Now, we also realised, well, Anne knew, because on Saturday at 5:30, and this is back in the day when shops used to shut at 5:30 on a Saturday, all the fresh produce would be reduced further. Yeah. So that meant our 40%, we'd get an extra 10% off with Anne, and we get an extra 10 to 20% off with the reduction on a Saturday. So we were doing really good maths from a very early age. On managing budgets and managing food and just navigating our way through life and starting on an entrepreneurial path, which I didn't realise then was really important. Yeah. So, from a very early age, I understood without realising it, gross, net.
Oh God, yeah.
Profit, loss, adding up, margins, etc., etc. And that's how my life started off from a very young teenager.
Wow. Okay. That's I didn't know that, and that's obviously really probably shows how much resilience you've got then, I'm assuming.
Yes,
given that start. And obviously the entrepreneurial nous of I was going to ask that actually about the quick save vouchers, because I thought if that was me, I'd go, yeah, okay, so can we get that? Obviously you can bulk buy, whatever you need as well, and you get your discount. Yeah. So it was only 10% as well.
It was 10%.
I'll tell you what, quick save needs to get it sorted.
Well, they didn't last, did they?
No, very true, very true. They used to have one near me. I remember the big red
and white sign. Yes,
white
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, my nan used to take me there actually. I remember. Yeah. So quick save. Yeah. Cool. So and tell me then. So obviously you've obviously had the foster care. You've obviously got obviously done the quick save vouchers. You've gone through all that. So sort of first job from there, then be really good to go through. That's okay.
So actually my first job was when I was 11. I worked on a farm, but then fast forward to when I was 14, I was living on my own with Anne. I realised I did need to supplement my income because it just wasn't enough. It would go on food and life's essentials, and there wasn't enough. So there was a famous politician that had said about getting on your bike and finding a job. So I literally did. That? I can't remember his name. I'll have to look it up. But I always remember the phrase of it. Tell us in the
comments on that, definitely. Yeah.
And I went on my bike up and down a road in Southport where there was lots of care homes and rest homes, and I knocked on the door eventually of one where a very tall Irish lady opened the door called Mrs. Smythe, and I basically begged her for a job, and she said, I haven't got any jobs, and I must have stood there like resilient and steadfast and said, I will really do anything. I'll cook, I'll clean, whatever you need me to do. And she said, where are you living? And I told her, and she said, start on Saturday. And she gave me an opportunity. And Mrs. Smythe took me into her house and took me under her wing, and not only taught me how to properly cook and properly clean and how to manage a house, but she showed me what love looks like.
Yeah.
And she showed me what good family life looked like.
Yeah.
And she had this huge dining room table in her care home, which her family, she had 5 children herself, and all the staff and all the residents would eat at every day. And in fact, it was her phrase, which I've now coined for whenever I do keynote speaking, which was, there's always more room at the table. Yeah. And I adopted that from Mrs. Smythe, who was an instrumental person in my life, that she made me feel that anything I wanted to put my mind to, I could do.
Yeah.
And I owed an awful lot to her. She sadly died this year, and it was a great loss.
So how much do you think she shaped your upbringing then?
Oh, hugely, absolutely hugely. I mean, just to have somebody that I could parachute into, albeit in a work environment at a very young age, but to know that you were being nurtured and that you were being cared for and that somebody was looking out for you. And as I said, she showed me what good family life looked like, and I captured those images in my heart and my head, and I held on to them, because one day I wanted the big dining room table filled with children and relatives and family and friends all around it, and to make sure that I could always make a provision that there was always more room at the table.
Yeah. And how did the upbringing shape your career aspirations then? Because obviously you've worked on the farm, you've worked with Mrs. Smythe, so obviously, what was your first job in, if you want to call it the corporate world, that's what we want to call it. So,
okay, so that's a great question. So when I was going through all of this, there would be lots of regular meetings with social services. And even as a young teenager, I'd go into these meetings and feel that there was a huge injustice in the power in the room, because there were people in the room who had the knowledge of the law, and there was me who didn't have the knowledge of the law. And I thought there was only one way that I could fix that, and that was going trying to learn it myself. So there was no internet then, so I'd get the bus to the library, and I would read the old Children Act as it was then, and just pick out literally nuggets of information that were relevant to my situation. And I would go back into the next meeting armed with that information and say, well, you are giving me £20 a week quick save vouchers, but actually under subsection 26, you should also be giving me A, B and C. And of course, that kind of backfired on me, because in that setting, I was then seen as more labelled as a rebel without a cause, because I was pushing back on authority. I wasn't seen as a young child who had gone to the library and done a bit of research and that should be applauded. It was more that I was trying to be disruptive to the social worker or the meeting, and I wasn't. I was just trying to pursue what was rightfully mine and to stand up for myself. And that was very difficult. But what that gave me, that experience, is an understanding that to try and get at the level playing field, I had to have an education, and the law really interested me. So I decided at a very early age I would love to be a barrister, but life took a different turn. It took me a while to get there.
Just before that, so I was going to ask you, do you think in today, anyone who's watching this who might be, in the care system now, potentially, do you think that if someone pushed back now, though, they'd get the same? You said the rebels, of course. For me, it's what's rightfully yours, and that should be what's given. But do you think in this day and age you'd be viewed the same? Because personally, I don't think you would be. I think people in the world within the TikTok, and you see people asking for police officers' badge numbers now, and it seems to be no, it's quite funny, but but you see it's quite the norm. I think that'd be considered the norm now. Where back when you had it wasn't. I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, I think there's much more accountability now.
Yeah.
And there's much more of an ability to be able to follow that footprint of who has cared for somebody and who has made decisions about that person. Like back then, it was just all merged into a paper file and it was lost, and decisions were made about you, and that was it. It was rubber stamped and it was gone through.
Yeah.
As I say, I think accountability is much more clearer now, which is better.
Absolutely.
In terms of young care leavers being able to get into the legal system, I've just joined an organisation called Lawyers That Care, and that is a group of lawyers who actually support care leavers being able to get into the legal system and mentor them. And it's a really good, it's a charitable organisation.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Good. Well, then what we'll do is we'll leave a link to that. If you can get me
amazing,
we'll leave a link in the notes. That'd be really good. So before we go on to barrister, then you said, obviously, you've done all your book reading. Obviously, you must be very book smart as well, by the way.
I wouldn't say that.
But you must be. You're going
to
be.
Do you know how I view my quota of intelligence is that I always feel that I'm not particularly academic, but what I am good at is I will put my mind to something and I will slog it through.
Yeah.
And I will absolutely get myself from A to B through sheer hard work, whereas some of my contemporaries could go the same path on a much easier and quicker route.
Yeah.
I may have to do it for longer, but I will get there through sheer determinants and resilience, as we keep saying.
Absolutely, yeah.
And just push it through.
Yeah.
And that's the difference and the contrast.
Again, I'm going to keep asking random questions here, but hard work or talent then?
Or a mixture of both.
Very good. But if you had to choose.
I think you mean as to which I would prefer to categorise me as.
Categorise you as, or just obviously you're an employer of people now as well. So if you're employing someone, and for yourself as well.
Yeah.
What's a better characteristic?
Oh.
And you've got to choose.
Yeah, hard work.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because talent and skill you can instill.
Yeah.
And you can support somebody on training and practical evolution throughout their career and time with us as a business. We often employ people who have got zero understanding of our sector.
Absolutely.
But we will bring them through. I've just taken on a 22-year-old graduate from Liverpool, and she has got no history in finance. But oh my Lord, is she super impressive? And, will she come through the ranks? Absolutely.
Yeah. And why is she super impressive?
Oh, there's a whole nother podcast on her.
We'll bring her on.
Absolutely. She's come from a particularly difficult background, and she decided that she wanted to understand how to trade. So a little bit like me, I did some trading when I was younger as well. And she went on holiday to Turkey with the Warren Buffett book, and she read it, and she worked out how to do trading, and she trades the market. She does commodities,
Right.
and this is a girl from a very difficult background who's now trading, and she does the New York Stock Exchange.
So she works for you, she trades in this,
and she
trades
trades,
in her own
and
time.
I allow her time within the business to be able to do her trades. And every day I ask her about how her trades are doing.
Bloody hell, Sue, everyone watches is going to ask you for a job. People can trade while they're working. You let yourself in something.
Well, she does it at set times, so we know when the New York Stock Exchange opens.
1?
1 o'clock. So she does her lunchtime then, so she can go and do that. She'll get up at 2 or 3 in the morning and do Japan and Tokyo, whatever it is, goes back to bed, and I absolutely take my hat off to her. And she has a very clear path of where she wants to go and how she wants to get to it. And I will support her the entire way.
You have to introduce me to her. She sounds very interesting.
She is fab.
She sounds very interesting. So, right, come on then. So,
okay.
Before barrister then, I want to get to there, but we're on a journey here,
okay,
aren't we?
We're on a journey.
So, what about before barrister then? So, what did you do first?
Okay, so I realised at 16 when I left school with no qualifications because
so you've got no because of all
everything that's going on. So there was nobody in my house, there was nobody in my environment to say to me, "Have you studied tonight? Have you done your homework?
Yeah.
Are you revising?" There was nobody. So now I'm on the backs of my kids every single day. Revision, have you done your homework? Because I know how important it is. But I left school at 16 with no qualifications and thought that I would talk my way into a job very, very quickly, and that I'd be able to become a solicitor and then a barrister and have this, fanciful route to success. And of course, reality.
That's happened, by the way.
Well, the reality was something different.
Yeah, no.
So I ended up, working from the age of 16,
yeah.
and I managed to get day release back into college and at night school, and just through that, grabbed enough qualifications to be able to eventually, at the ripe old age of 21, being viewed then as a mature student, to talk my way in on an interview into what was then Preston Polytechnic, to go and do a law degree.
Would that be UCLan now?
It is UCLan now, correct? Yeah, it's University of Central Lancashire now. And the professor there who interviewed me gave me a break. And although I didn't have the full suite of, traditional exams like A-levels and O-levels and GCSEs and everything, he gave me an opportunity because I told him my backstory.
Yeah, of course.
And I went on that law degree, knowing that I would have to self-fund it, knowing that I would have to, do everything myself. But I got my head down and I studied. And there was a great opportunity. It came up one day when there was an advert which went up on the student union wall, and it said, "Anyone want to go and live in Poitiers in France for a year?" So I thought, I don't hardly know where France is, let alone where Poitiers is. But I thought, a year out of Preston,
no brainer.
I'll take that. So I went along and they said, if you don't speak French, you can leave the room now. So I left, and thinking that was a bit of an injustice in the whole system. I always had this little morsel in my head that one day I'd live in New York, random. So I wrote, me and another girl wrote to the principal of a university there and said, wouldn't it be a splendid idea if we did an exchange program between the state of New York and Preston Polytechnic? And this was clearly before Google Earth had been. And this was
before there was no program in place.
There was no program in place. And this was clearly before Google Earth had been invented, because, with no disrespect to Preston, but, if the Google Earth were our little old Polly was then, contrasting to where
this is Manhattan.
So it was like, very starkly different. But they said yes. They said yes.
It's amazing.
And so we ended up on an exchange program, upstate New York, and had the most amazing time.
I bet.
And
for 1 year.
An academic year.
Yeah, okay.
And another string to our bow, which was something we could add to our CV and something we could talk about at interview. So I managed to get through my law degree, got a 2-1, and I then had to apply for bar school. And I wrote off because I needed, obviously, funding.
Sure.
And I got a place at bar school, and I won 2 scholarships to fund part of it as well. But then when I moved down to London, I was, it was very difficult because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And I had to get a job to support myself in London. And I went into a temping agency and got a job via them on the reception of a large American bank, which was called Lehman Brothers, which is now gone.
Yep.
And I worked on reception. And this was just post Big Bang. So, it was deregularization of the stock exchange. All the American banks had flooded into London. It was a hive of activity and excitement. Early 90s. Hive of excitement. It was all convertible BMWs and guys in red braces and girls with American tan tights on and white trainers walking to the tube, and they were all just so cool. And I was just mesmerized by this because, 2 minutes ago I was living in Salvation Army land.
Oh God.
And this was a huge contrast of champagne was for, breakfast, lunch and dinner, and things called sushi,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what is this?
Yeah.
But a big learning curve. And I was on reception, but all the activity was going on the trading floor upstairs,
Sure.
two levels above me. And I would sometimes get the honorary job of taking some sandwiches up to the trading floor.
Yeah.
And I would go as slow as I could on that trading floor so I could absorb every minute of the atmosphere on the trading floor, eyes on stalks. And I was like, go back to my lonely job on reception downstairs. And I was like, I've got to get up there.
Yeah.
So I looked on the big Apple computer as it was then. Who the CEO of Lehman Brothers London was, and he was actually the CEO for Europe.
Right.
And he was an amazing man called Dan Tyree.
Okay.
This big, huge American guy.
Yeah.
And I waited for him, and he walked past reception one day, and I ran over to him at the lifts. And this is the story I tell because I always say to people, always ask, or never be afraid to walk through the door and ask, because somebody can only say no. And I ran up to Dan Tyree and I said, Mr. Tyree, my name is Sue Sherman, as it was then. I said, I'm at bar school. I'm trained to be a barrister. I'm working on reception to pay my own way through, but I really, really, really want to work on the trading floor. And he was so gobsmacked, and he just stood there and looked at me for about 5 seconds. And then he said, come see me at 3:00, in a very cool American accent. And I went up at 3:00, and he basically leapfrogged me into the internship program, which was a massive thing to do.
And why do you think he did that?
I think he did it because I had the tenacity, the front, the balls, whichever phraseology you want to use, to actually go up to him and ask for it. And also living in his little bubble of, travelling on the tube, getting off the tube, walking through Liverpool Street to Lehman Brothers. He'd never been confronted by a young girl with a story, desperate to get onto the trading floor.
Yeah.
He only sees people who majority were male, white, who had come through a very fortuitous, traditional route onto the American trading floor. Their fathers were traders, their brothers were traders. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here was somebody who was showing a strength of character to actually be confident enough to go up to him. And secondly, that I've come from Liverpool down to London. It was the whole Dick Whittington story to further myself and make something of myself in my career. And I think he was just
mesmerised.
Yeah, not I would say mesmerised, but I think he thought that there is some sort of potential here in this young girl. I'll give her a chance. And he put me on the trading floor, and I started off in emerging markets, which are not now emerging markets.
The BRICS.
So no, like countries which were emerging then. Back then, so like Brazil was an emerging market.
So
back
Brazil,
then.
Russia, and
and now they're not. Obviously. So that, and I did foreign exchange, I did derivatives, you did M&A, hedge funds, all this phraseology and environment that was a brand new exposure to me. I remember one day. Every day, the first time it came round, this little lady came round with a trolley, literally, and she would serve tea and coffee and cakes going up and down the aisles, and it was all crazy. Everyone 2-3 phones and shouting and screaming at each other, and all this sort of chaos going on. And I took, you didn't have to pay for them, you took one of these cakes, and it was the first time I'd ever tasted a custard donut.
Very nice.
And this was just so beyond my experience of life, this custard donut. I can taste it now, and the taste of this yellow soft custard in the middle of this warm donut was just so beautiful. And I was thinking, this is the life.
That's so American.
I'm on the trading floor eating custard donuts. It was fabulous.
That's amazing. And what lessons did you take from working in such a high pressure environment?
That irrelevant of how high pressured your environment is, that always respect other people. And I always remember there was a guy on the desk, as they were called, that I worked on one particular occasion. And even though I was in there every day, so I'd work certain hours, and they allowed me to flex my hours around my studies as well. So I was very grateful for Lehman's for giving me this amazing opportunity. And even though I worked next to him every day, he never once asked my name.
Right.
And he never, because he was totally disinterested in me. He was so in the zone of trading and he would just shout to me, and he would make up a name to call me. So he would shout, Mary, Mary. And I'd be like, who's Mary? But he obviously meant me, So he'd just make up these names and bark at me and demand that, shout at you.
Was he like a senior trader, was he?
Yeah. He was a senior trader. But that
older guy.
Well, he was very much older than me then.
He was
probably about 40 odd that point, you know. So in answer to your question, what did I learn from it? The answer is very critically clear, is that no matter what pressured environment you're in, always have respect for your colleagues. Always try and remember people's names. Try and remember who they are and what they're doing, and bring them up with you.
Yeah, I mean, respect in any sort of business, or even just in any walk of
life.
I think respect. I've always been brought to sort of respect anyone, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I say anyone, maybe we can't respect everyone for certain views they have, but the majority of people, if you don't know, you've got to give everyone a chance, haven't you? So I think that's the main thing. So how long were you at Lehman Brothers for?
Only for about 18 months.
Okay.
And they sent me out to New York for a little bit as well. And then parallel to...
Where did you live in New York?
So we were upstate in New York.
Okay,
and then, but Lehman Brothers was in Manhattan at the time. It's gone now, sadly. But so when I was finishing at Lehman's, at the same time, I'd qualified as a barrister.
Yeah.
And then I was at a real crossroads, because Lehman's offered to keep me on, and they wanted to take me through the whole trading and be a female trader, which was quite unusual back then. There wasn't a lot of female traders.
Yeah.
And I was really, really torn. And, I was fortunate that I was in that position to make a choice, but my heart had already been solidified into becoming a barrister. And back then, as is now, it's very difficult to get pupillage. And I went on this pupillage interviews, and I was offered, I think, 3, possibly 4 pupillages, which was extremely unusual. Yeah. And I took a pupillage in Liverpool and came back home and practiced as a barrister in Liverpool.
So what year was that roughly?
So I got called to the bar in 1993.
Okay.
A long time ago.
Over 30 years ago now.
31 years, yeah.
But it doesn't feel like that though.
No, it goes too quick.
Yeah, no, I bet it doesn't. So barrister then, which is obviously one of my favourite topics. I just think barristers are an insanely interesting people. A lot of them that I've ever met in the past they're just characters, shall we say?
Yes.
I think most barristers are. Maybe I'm generalising and stereotyping a little bit too much, but I think most barristers are just great characters. So do you want to just talk us through that journey of being a barrister? Obviously, you've got there.
Yes.
What you did, how you enjoyed it, the pressures, the stress. I suppose anyone watching this might want to become a barrister, so it's probably best just give them the
highs
the
and
10-15
lows.
minute lowdown maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so after you're qualified as a barrister, you then have to get your pupillage, and your pupillage is separated into 2 lots of 6 months pupillage.
Yeah.
The first 6 months is you're with a pupil master, so you're learning on the job, and then the second 6 months you start to earn your own funds, your own money, and you're thrown out to the exciting places like Wallasey Magistrates to do a bail application and things like that. But then you build up your own practice, and you start to get a reputation with the solicitors, your professional clients and your lay clients, and that's how you start to build up your own income, and your income starts to increase.
So is it key to correct my understanding? But is it key to have good relationships with solicitors? Because obviously solicitors need barristers, don't they, at some point during a legal proceeding? That's really key
to have good relationship with your solicitors, and good relationship with your clients, because the clients will then feed back to the solicitor. Because often the solicitor won't be at court with you, be a clerk. But the solicitor will get feedback from the client as to how you speak to them. I think that without being too pretentious, I was good at being a barrister because your bedside manner is everything.
Oh God, yeah.
Being able to speak to a lay client in lay client terminology, and getting an understanding of the circumstances which they found themselves in, and if necessary, some empathy with that.
Yeah.
And just representing them to the best, in the best possible way that you can. I was always very, very clear that I would represent my clients to as well as I could. And there's only one way of doing that, and that's through preparation.
Sure.
So you can't wing it. Well, people do try and wing it, but they're very easily caught out.
Yeah.
Counsel that go into a conference room and ask the client to tell them all about it, haven't really read the papers, sitting at the red light trying to skim read things very, very quickly isn't proper preparation. You've got to try and prepare it. You've got to be able to work out a way with your compass of getting through cross-examination from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And that can be involving a lot of information, files and files and files of information, and a lot of technical information as well.
Okay. So in terms of who you represented in what sort of cases, what do you specialise in?
So I started off with general common law. So that means I did crime, jury trials, civil and family. And then I ended up specialising in family law. Yeah. So I only did family law. So I would do public law cases. So I would predominantly represent parents in child protection matters, which was usually care proceedings, and sometimes I'd represent the local authority and guardian, but not very often. I was well known for representing parents.
Okay.
And I think I had a good understanding of being able to represent parents because I could see that some of these parents had ended up in the situation which they had because of that cyclical failure by the system. So that their parents had been in care and their grandparents had been in care, and they'd all produced children, which produced children, which produced children, which end up in care. So unless you try and do something at whatever point of the system you are touching in, including at legal level, then it will go on forever.
Yeah.
And I would try and navigate my clients and the local authority to a position which would try and support a family rather than doing the decimation of removal of the children,
right.
Of which they end up in adoption. That's extremely final. And there are cases which require that finality of adoption, absolutely, and no contact. But there are a lot of cases which required also support and change and at policy level, not just at practical level as well.
So given your background, your upbringing then, would you say the barrister situation was more of a vocation then than sort of a job? Because you obviously had Lehman Brothers trading, could have earned a lot of money probably.
Yes.
New York that time probably made a lot of money actually back then.
Yeah.
But obviously you come to be a barrister now. Obviously I know barrister can get paid well, but obviously in criminal law and sort of doing what you're doing, probably not paid as well as say someone, representing big corporates as an example. So I suppose my question is simply, is it a vocation? Was it a vocation more than a
No, it wasn't.
Job?
It was a career, and it was something that I really, really enjoyed as a career. Yeah. And I ended up being quoted in the Times as the top 10 earning barrister.
Oh, wow.
Within family law. And it was interesting actually that year because the majority of those top 10 were actually from the northwest of England, which was really good to see that they weren't just all London council, as you often predict. Yeah. So that was a really good thing to see. In terms of where my career then took me, I practiced for 23 years. I then decided after 23 years that I just had enough. There had been a lot of cuts in the bar. There was a lot of people who were miserable and depressed and were walking around going, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to learn how to bake cakes and sell them and design people's gardens and things like this. And I'd be like, but you've got so many other skills as a barrister. Sure. You can cross-pollinate those skills into so many different ways. And as a barrister, throughout my years of practice, I'd always set up other businesses as well. So I'd always been very commercial. So I'd set up design company, PR agency, marketing companies, etc.
So sorry to interrupt you. How did you, it's really interesting because I do a lot on my channel about side hustles and that is essentially a side hustle. But barrister, really busy, very pressurized. You told me you're probably more of a hard worker. So you must have been working so hard, so many hours. How did you manage the two at the same time?
So I set up a team It wasn't just a side hustle. I had a proper office, set up a team. We won the Everton Football Club contract. This is all in the 2000s, capital culture year. And it was really good agencies and companies.
Wow.
Had a team of 7 or 8, I think, back then. We did a lot of stuff at the Cannes Film Festival. We run the Ferretti Yachts and the Persian Yachts contract. So lots of high quality contract work, but just set a team up there and I would dip in and dip out of it. And
as and when.
As and when. But the understanding of marketing and press and design has stayed with me throughout my entire corporate history and future, because they are so important. How to get your brand right, what it looks like, how optically it's perceived, what's your messaging, what do your collaterals look like. They're really important. So actually running those type of companies back then gave me a really good, strong foundation for what I did in the future.
Definitely. Oh, absolutely. And I suppose that brings us nicely onto Harrogate Group.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, what you do?
Okay, so fast forward after retiring, I then...
So was it a full, retire as in
Retire from the bar.
From the bar? Okay.
Just retire from the bar, yes, not retired.
You don't seem the type of person to retire, if I'm really honest.
Live in Barbados, sipping a pina colada.
You might be able to do 3 months, but I think then you get bored.
Yes, can you imagine?
I can.
Fast forward then. So I had then met our CEO, Faisal Arif, who was based in Birmingham.
Okay.
And he was talking about setting up a satellite corporate finance office in Liverpool.
Okay.
Because a lot of the big CF companies in Liverpool had left. They'd done Manchester, but not Liverpool. So there was a bit of a gap here.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of activity in Liverpool and the surrounding areas, which I think is often overlooked, which is great for companies like us because we're there to pick it up. So I was like, okay, let's do it. So we set up a what started off as a corporate finance arm, doing mergers and acquisitions and or bringing in PE.
So what size of companies are you advising on them?
Well, sort of anything between sort of 5 and 30 million pound sales, really.
Sales.
That's sort of bracket. So if they were selling, yes.
Yeah.
So if they were selling.
Yeah.
And this was just going through lockdown and post-lockdown. So what happened with lockdown was in COVID, a lot of business owners were sort of sitting there with a whole heap of headaches on their desk. And those who were in a position to had thought about selling actually made the decision to sell in COVID.
Yeah.
So the sales market became very active.
Okay.
Lots of people were prepared to cash in their chips.
Yeah.
And, if it meant they were selling for 10 million rather than 13 million, they were doing it. So we were very active on the sales side. And within 6 months of that, what happened was a couple of our clients completed on their sales. And they realised that they had this pot of wealth and this pot of funds which they'd never had to manage before. We're not wealth managers then. So one of our clients was like, well, I want to invest in bridging and into property development. So we pivoted, and part of the company then set up the real estate funding side. So we also now do, so half the company is just pure funding on real estate. So we do bridging, development finance, etc. We have high net worths who sit behind us. They get between 15 and 20% returns. They get first charge on the property, day one retained interest usually, and they're in and out within 6 to 12 months.
Nice.
That gives the developer those funds to secure the site.
Yeah. And
then we exit them on the bridge and then take them into development finance.
Obviously, I understand bridging. For anyone doesn't know what bridging is, can you just explain how bridging works?
So bridging is a way of getting short-term money to secure something usually quickly.
Yeah.
It's the speed of bridging. So if you go to, one of your high street banks and ask them for £5 million to secure a site that's got planning on it, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
We have our in-house teams, so all our compliance, our due diligence, etc., is all done very quickly. So we can answer somebody within 24 hours and give them terms within 24 hours. Cool. So that means we can lend the money out quickly. As I say, we take the first charge on the site. And then we've got the high net worths who sit behind us. So we've got those deployed assets already there that we can pull down and utilise very quickly.
Yeah.
And then the developer who's lent the money will go away, sort out his planning. Once he's sorted his planning out, we'll take the site he'll then get it into development finance, and then we'll go into the next stage.
How quick can you lend money then?
So we can, sometimes we have done it in 9 days.
Wow.
It depends on legals. So I've become poacher turned gamekeeper with the lawyers. So we have a whole raft of lawyers that we use across the Northwest and in Birmingham as well.
Okay.
And we have lawyers that we want to be able to make sure that they're not going on holiday when we give them a case, that they answer the phone. We ask them that, to make sure that they summarise the whole activity in the day in one email at the end of the day, rather than sending 20 or 30 in the day, and it clogs up your inbox. Just those sorts of working practices and KPIs that we asked our bank of lawyers to work towards, and that makes the whole process so much quicker and easier and smoother.
And I know every property, every site is probably different, but in terms of a range, because obviously, if my understanding of bridging loans is you charge 1% per month.
It can vary, so it can float around the 1%. Depends on the exit, depends on how much the loan is, and depends who you're lending it to as well. You do a risk assessment on it.
Okay, but it's around 1% plus.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And in terms of staff, you've got how many staff at Harrogate Group?
So we're only a small boutique firm, really. We're 7 or 8. We've got offices in Birmingham, and we're just taking some office space in Liverpool as well, next to the town hall. We have a good, strong team. We are flexible in our arrangements of our employment within our team. So we've got people who work for us who are mums with school-age children.
Cool.
So we allow them to drop their kids off at school and then come into the office. We allow them to leave at 2:45 and pick the kids up.
Nice.
And then they can work around those times. We're not clock watchers. We expect them to get on and do it, and we trust them to do it. We're office-based, sort of 3, maybe 4 days a week. Max 3 days probably,
so
actually.
Hybrid working.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a message from one of my team this morning saying it's a children's nativity play at 2:00 tomorrow. Can I leave a bit earlier? Absolutely. We don't want any of our team to miss a GP appointment, a dentist appointment, a nativity play. You can't put a value on seeing your kids in the nativity play.
I agree.
So the work will get done, but there are your family priorities as well.
Yeah, I mean, at Agility, my telecoms business were the exact same. So probably hybrid working 3 days a week. 3 days a week in, 3 days a week in the office, 2 days at home. Or I can switch around as well.
Yeah.
We're very, very, and in terms of all that sort of stuff, we've got people coming a bit late on a Thursday, for example. But I'm very much of the mantra, as long as the work gets done.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't get done, I'm very unhappy. I'm not going to lie to you. But as long as it gets done, and if it needs to get done later on at night when the kids are in bed, then I expect it to be done. If we're going to get that flexibility, don't get me wrong. But
I'm totally
I think
with you.
flexible working is definitely the way forward. It's the key to retain good staff as well. So if you've got a good team, you want to retain them, make sure they're happy, obviously pay them well as well.
Yeah.
But I couldn't agree more. Very much of a similar mindset there. And I think that's maybe since COVID, that has enhanced for a lot of businesses, I'm hoping, because we were a much smaller team. I started my business back in 2017, 18 now. And, back then, the world of work was very different. It was, look at me, I'm in just a hoodie today. Maybe if I was doing this in 2018, I'd be in a shirt and maybe some suit pants. But the world has changed massively in the past, definitely last 10 years and since COVID. So it is good to see. So just on to sort of links back into your personal story a bit in the fostering journey. So it's maybe a silly question this, but what inspired you to become a foster parent?
Well, there's a very, I hope interesting, certainly true story in answer to that question. So Christmas Day, 1982, giving away my age, I was 14, and I was living at the Salvation Army hostel, and it was a pretty miserable day. And there was a Jewish children's home, which was on the same road. Yeah. And obviously they don't celebrate Christmas, but they have a celebratory meal on that day. And they came and asked Anne and I if we would like to join them, which was very kind. And we went in, and I walked into this large room. And in this room was just, in my head now, I see hundreds of children, but in reality, it was probably maybe 30 children. This room of loads of children, all young children, sat on the floor. and they were all orphans living in this children's home. And I remember that there was a set of twin girls sat there with little black Cleopatra haircuts. And I remember looking at them in particular. They were about 5 or 6, and thinking to myself, why is there not a queue of Daily Mail readers down the road with placards saying, this is wrong?
Yeah.
Let's get these children out of here.
Yeah.
Why aren't people queuing up to take these children home? I just couldn't at 14 get my head around it. Yeah. So despite my own adversity, despite my own difficult situation, which I found myself in, I was very much drawn to the injustice which these young children were facing. I felt that they were even in a worse position than what I was in. So I made myself a life promise on that day. And my life promise was that even though I could have children, I would choose not to have children, because I wanted to only foster and adopt children which were in the system and had little or no prospect of ever leaving the system. And that was my life promise. So fast forward, when I got up to my sort of late 30s, I decided to train to be a foster carer, and I joined the ranks with Liverpool City Council, who I was foster carer for 20 years with. And at this point, I'd just got married. I'd married Mark Wright, who was captain of Liverpool Football Club. And Mark came along on that journey with me, which was amazing because this was my train that was running. Sure. And Mark came along on that train. And what he did was really good, because with his profile and, the club behind us, etc., we raised a lot of awareness for the issues of fostering and adoption.
Sure.
And I became a foster carer. And I got a phone call one day, which that was the first phone call. When you qualify as a foster carer, you're dying for the phone to ring for somebody to place a child with you, because you're so green and naive, and you think that you're Mary Poppins, you're going to be able to save them all and all the rest of it. And the phone rang, and my social worker said to me, "We've got a child that we are thinking of placing with you." And I said, "Oh right, okay." Great. And hiding my excitement, had to be really cool. She said, "Yes, it's a very high profile case though." I said, "Oh, right, okay." She said, "It's Shannon Matthews." Now, Shannon Matthews at the time was a young girl who is now 26, 27. And her mother reported her missing to the police, and she was missing for 24 days. And this was out in Yorkshire. And a massive manhunt ensued, became, national and international story. And ultimately she was found under her mother's boyfriend's uncle's divan bed, hidden in the divan bed. So a very traumatizing situation for this young girl, who had to be removed and placed out of area. She didn't ultimately end up being placed with me, which was probably a good idea, because I did say my concerns at the time about this young girl with a very strong Yorkshire accent being placed into the middle of Liverpool. And at the time, News at 10 was still putting her photograph on as headline picture every night. And I remember saying in these meetings afterwards, why are they still putting her photograph on even though she's been found? You're reinforcing this child's image, which was so wrong. But that's how I operate.
Yes.
So the next phone call I got was for 4 children, and they said, "Can you look after these children for two weeks while their foster carer goes on holiday?" And those children stayed for 2.5 years. I've now adopted one of them. I then got another placement of 3 children 8 years ago, and they are now no longer in care. They are legally my kids, so that took me up to 4. And then I met an older girl called Ruth, who I was actually interviewing a number of years ago for a job. And although she's an adult herself, she'd clearly had a rough time in care, and she didn't have a mum around, etc. Yeah. And I said to her, "Well, I'll be your mum." So she's number 5. So I've adopted 5, and I've absolutely loved it, and they are the best thing that's ever happened to me.
And how did you balance that with your amazing career? Because it's
so at times it's challenging because on top of being a parent, you're answerable to a corporate parent, the local authority.
Yeah.
And of course, there's lots of paperwork and training and regulatory control around that situation, quite rightly so. So you would have to have additional meetings and be there for them, etc. So just balancing that and having to say no at times at work within a work environment to make sure that the personal side of your family life was catered for as well.
And did you have any time for you?
Rarely. So I'm often asked this question: what do you do in your spare time? And I always feel very, very inadequate when people say, "Oh, I do jiu-jitsu and taekwondo," or I go running. I took up boxing years ago, age 50. I decided that I'd got divorced, and I say to people, when you're down on the canvas, get up and put your boxing gloves on and crack on.
Yeah.
Literally, for me, boxing was the singular most amazing sport that I could have got involved in because it just makes you such a strong mental person, but physically strenuous as well. And it was the best training I ever did. I did a white collar boxing fight.
Did you win?
So they put me against a 26-year-old black belt taekwondo girl. And I remember I was literally about to go out into the boxing ring, and my 15-year-old daughter was stood next to me. Can I swear?
Of course.
And she said to me, "Fucking hell, Mum, look at her calf muscles." And I remember thinking, great, I'm here trying to limber up like Rocky, thinking, what am I doing? And I have to look at this girl's calf muscles next to me. Amazing. But I went in, I did my best, the longest 3 rounds of 2 minutes in your life in living history. But I got a draw against her.
You got a draw?
I got a draw.
Really,
I also got a fractured rib, but I got a draw against her.
Can't get it from a fractured rib.
And if you watch it on YouTube, I think I won.
Is it on YouTube?
It's on. I won. Yes, it's on YouTube.
I'll link to it.
Don't.
I will.
I won.
I'll find it.
I won.
If you don't give me, I will find that and I will link to it.
So the only thing that I do for me is I rescue dogs. So I get myself into all sorts of situations of, I love dogs. I go on holiday and I will take the sausages and the eggs from the hotel buffet and I will go out onto the beach and find random dogs and I feed the dogs. And then I ended up in Morocco with 2 dogs, which I got flown back to the UK, including a famous YouTuber from America contacted the rescue in Morocco and said he wanted to fly 10 dogs from Morocco back to the UK and chose one of my dogs, which I'd been paying for its veterinary fees on. And so my dog, which ended up with 3 legs, then was filmed, sat in a private jet. I kid you not, 10 dogs in a private jet that he flew from Morocco to the UK.
Did he fly with them?
Sorry?
Did he fly with them?
Yes, yeah. Him and his whole film crew and everything flew with these 10 dogs. So my dog Brago ended up from a leg hanging off on a Morocco beach, being picked up by me, fed, watered, vet bills, to sitting on a private jet, with a Bellini and a bit of sushi. Yeah. So again, I suppose from that story is, if I may use the analogy, is no matter what's happening, there's always a potential for a positive outcome. That dog's life has been transformed, ended up being adopted by a guy in Manchester, Dogs for Rescue in Manchester, run by Emma Billington. I'll love to put a link in the thing.
Yeah, we can do that.
She does an amazing job out there. And one of her physiotherapists, who had the swimming pool for his leg and everything, fell in love with him and adopted him.
That's fantastic. So if there's anything anybody could take away from this podcast, what would it be?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I always say, first of all, if you can in life, be the Mrs. Smythe or the Dan Tyree. Open the door to people and extend that helping hand, whether that's into your home or whether that's commercially. Yep. Help them up onto the trading floor. No matter what the boundaries are, just help them up. I would also say, as I said before, if you hit the canvas and you got a bloody nose, get up, put your boxing gloves on and get back out there. And I think probably the one which I repeat endlessly is there's always more room at the table. And that is at home.
Yeah.
if you can, if you're in a position to open your heart and your home, whether that's fostering or adoption, then please do so. And in a commercial environment, Ella, who I mentioned before, I didn't actually have a role for Ella. But when I interviewed her and I was so impressed by her, I made a role for her. I made more room at the commercial table for her. And that's probably the best one I can give you.
Well, this has been a bit of a roller coaster, I think. So it's been a very good one, by the way. But lastly for me, what's next for you professionally, personally? Because it sounds like to me you've got a lot left in the tank, even though you've done a hell of a lot in your 27 years on this earth, as we said before. So,
yes,
took me a second, that didn't it? But what's next for you?
Okay, so next for us, a very exciting part of our commercial growth is we are starting a wealth management company. Next year. That launches in Q1 of 2025.
Brilliant.
And we because naturally and organically we are dealing with high net worths, and we also create high net worths once we've helped sell their businesses. So we are just finalising the details between us and a regulated wealth management company now, and doing that as a joint approach.
As a JV?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So it's a really exciting
That
bit.
is really exciting, actually.
Maybe we'll come back and just talk about wealth management
100%, yeah, no shout about it, because my career originally, I was going to go into all that.
Okay.
I was originally, so then I met my wife and just went into sales.
And she spent the money for you?
She spends the money all the time for me, to be honest with you. But that's another podcast. We could do another podcast on all sorts and that. But no, that's been really good. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
That was really interesting.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we will speak again. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. All the links that we've discussed today will be in the show notes. And listen, if you want to find Sue, Harrogate Group, we'll put a link to that as well. So if you're looking to sell your business, if you're looking for advice and wealth management, even though we can't promote that yet, as I'm sure. We're not promoting it. We're just saying in the future, potentially, once it's all said and done.
Funding and bridging.
Funding and bridging, absolutely. So any property buffs watching this, definitely give Stu a shout. And I'll see you all in the next one.